Hey guys, so today's video is going to be some of my recommended World War II historical fiction reads. And I'm going to be mentioning 5 books here. Although I'm going to be talking about them from my favorite to my least favorite, none of these books I didn't like. I gave all of these books either a 4-star rating or a 5-star rating, so just know I recommend all of these World War II historical fiction books, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what each one is about. As I have mentioned before here on my channel, I really love historical fiction, especially World War II historical fiction. I think what makes World War II historical fiction so compelling is that these events actually happened. They may be fictional, but they are based in fact. Also, while all these books show the depravity of mankind, they also show the goodness and the hope that arises in the darkest and darkest of times. So there always is something hopeful to gain from reading these books, even if they are filled with tragedy. So now let's just get on into the books. My favorite World War II historical fiction is The Girl You Left Behind by Jojo Moyes. If you didn't know, she also wrote Me Before You. I'm sure you've heard of that book and that movie, and this book is much better than Me Before You in my opinion. So it has 2 stories involved. There's a modern day story, which I'm kind of about, and then there is the World War II historical fiction side of the story, and that's about this young woman who lives in France, which has been occupied by German soldiers, and she is kind of forced to take care of some of these Germans who come to eat dinner at her house/inn. And it's her story. It's a story of her love for her husband, who has been enlisted in the war efforts, and so he is gone from her. But it is so good. I had goosebumps when I was reading it. It's just written very well, and it's a really good story, so definitely check that out. Next is a book that you may have heard of because it's more recently popular, and that is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This book has a storyline very similar to the storyline from The Girl You Left Behind. There are 2 French sisters. One of them, Vienne, is married. She has a young daughter who she absolutely loves, and Vienne has a younger sister, Isabel, who just really wants to help for the war effort. She's kind of like a rebel. She doesn't want to just let Germany take over. She wants to be an active part in some resistance. Vienne's story is very much like our character's story in The Girl You Left Behind, in that her husband also goes away in the war, and just like our character in The Girl You Left Behind, Vienne has to care for a German soldier who comes to billet at her house. I love that this book had 2 main characters because each character acted differently. Vienne and Isabel were, although sisters, they were very dissimilar in how they responded to the war, and I love the contrast between these 2 sisters. This book is also very heartbreaking, as you can imagine. Any of these stories in this video are going to be heartbreaking, but this one just kind of gets you. I gave The Nightingale 5 stars. So this video wouldn't be complete if I didn't talk about The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So this book was released quite a few years ago. I read it, I believe, when I was finishing high school / starting college, somewhere in that time. And it is a young adult novel, although I don't really know why it is, because it definitely could be read by anyone. I really don't know why this is classified as young adult, but whatever, we'll give it to him. This book is about a young girl named Liesel, and she lives in Germany, and she has a love for books, and she starts to steal them, hence the title, The Book Thief. There are a lot of events, obviously, that take place in this book beyond that. I think out of this whole list, though, this one is the most heartbreaking of all the World War II historical fiction books that I mentioned, so just be warned. It's very heavy and dark, but it is also really good. It's really hopeful, and it's a book that will give you shivers. It's a book that will stay in your mind for long after you've read it. I don't know if I would recommend this out of all of the books to read, considering it's not like my most favorite historical fiction, but I feel like this is a book anybody could read and get something from for sure. Next, I also have another young adult historical World War II fiction novel, and this one is Salt of the Sea by Rupa Sepetys. I believe that's how it's pronounced, and I read this book last month. It's a little bit different from the first 3 books that I mentioned. It actually follows the sinking of the Gustav ship. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I kind of forget. I was reading the audiobook, so I really have no excuse for pronouncing anything wrong. But it's a different event in World War II history, and it's not just about Jewish people, it's not just about German people, there's Polish people, there's different nationalities present in this book, so it's a little bit different from the other books, and I really like this perspective. It's romance in this book, there's heartbreak, there's really everything that you would expect from one of these books. Finally, I have to mention The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. I don't know. This book is kind of similar to the first book in the fact that it has a modern day story, and then it also has the World War II story. And of course the World War II story is better. It's always going to be better. I actually really didn't like the modern day story. So the modern day story is about this Jewish girl, and a very old German man approaches her and asks her to kill him because he confesses to her that he was actually involved in the concentration camps, and he has been known as an upstanding citizen in this whole city and town she lives in, but he has this deep dark secret, and he really wants to die. He cannot live with himself anymore. All he does is think about what he did when he was younger, and he wants this Jewish girl to have the mercy to kill him because he just cannot stand to be alive, and he has tried to kill himself, but he just wasn't able to do it. As you can imagine, that is a wild way to start a book, and it's a wild concept. This story has some very brutally intense scenes. There were scenes that I just honestly had to stop reading the book because it got so overwhelmingly intense and heartbreaking. Just be warned that this book was very, very heavy. What really makes this book fantastic is the story of her grandmother, and the story of her grandmother is the World War II story. And the grandmother's story starts when she's younger. She's not even in high school, or maybe she is, but she's in this like teenager stage. So we read about the teenager's perspective going through the trauma of World War II and everything she experiences. Truly, truly heartbreaking. There are some twists and turns in here that you may not see coming. I think I was thinking I was getting around to one of them, but when it was fully revealed, it was just a complete shock, and it was really incredible. So those are the 5 World War II reads that I wanted to mention in this video. I love World War II historical fiction, obviously. So if you have any other recommendations that I didn't mention in this video, I would really love to hear them. So you could just please leave those in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and happy reading.